Welcome to Global Perspectives. What are Germany's interests in Florida? For answers, we turn to Annetta Klein, the Consul General in Miami.
Global Perspectives with Pulitzer Prize-winning commentator John Bercia.
Welcome to the show, Annetta.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be on the program.
Tell us about the mission of Germany in Florida.
Our mission is threefold. First of all, of course, we are here to assist German citizens who are here as residents or as tourists. Secondly, we try to promote economic cooperation. And thirdly, and that's my favorite one, we're here to reach out to Floridians, to Puerto Ricans, and the people living on the US Virgin Islands to tell them about Germany, to make them curious and have them ask questions about Germany.
I'm glad you mentioned the other geographic areas. How do those differ from what you do in Florida specifically? And I seem to remember seeing something about the Bahamas on your website.
That's correct, because the Bahamas are a bit far apart from our embassy in the Bahamas. We do take some consular duties of the embassy there, but otherwise the service to German citizens is not very different for the areas we are covering, Florida, Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. For the residents, we take care of their passports when they need renewal or help them to get social assistance which they receive from Germany, these kind of matters. Well, also in other things, the only difference is that it is a bit more difficult to get to Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands, while I can drive up to Orlando in a few hours.
But have you had the opportunity to visit those places yet?
Not yet. I'm a recent arrival to Florida, and I'll be going there in March.
In March. Tell us where you were before you arrived in Florida. You were in a very different place.
Yes. Until July last year, I was Germany's Consul General in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
And what did that entail in terms of duties? I'm sure some of the same types of things that you do here, but what was unique about the environment in Saudi Arabia?
Unique to the environment in Saudi Arabia is probably that their society is very different from Germany's or the society in the US. You have a very tight-knit, family-oriented society, and their daily life is ruled strongly by their religion. So you have to take that into account in your work, which is not difficult. It just sets the routine. And we made it our focus to work with their women's universities and set up programs to exchange information on all kinds of academic subjects.
What would be a typical partnership that you arranged there with one of the women's universities, just generally?
They were very diverse. There was cooperation to draw attention to the traditional way of building houses in the southwestern part of Saudi Arabia, in Asir. We cooperated with the university, with the French Consulate General, and had a number of presentations. We visited that part of the country. We're very happy to see that this project was taken up by the media and caused a lot of interest in the western region of Saudi Arabia.
Before Saudi Arabia, you served in a variety of interesting places. Could you tell us about some of them?
Yes. Immediately before going to Saudi Arabia, I served again as a consul general in Poland, in Gdansk, another port city, by the way, and I'm always attracted to ports. I think their operation is very interesting and brings us all together. The most fascinating, usually for other people, assignment I had was Afghanistan. People are thrilled that I went there, and while it was a diplomatic assignment, I think it is special in a way that it entailed working bilaterally with the government of Afghanistan, multilaterally, because a lot of UN programs and organizations are working in Afghanistan, and of course it has a security aspect. So I was there as a deputy head of mission and had to make sure that Germans who lived in Afghanistan or worked in Afghanistan, and the embassy of course knew how to operate under the circumstances.
Were there any dangerous moments when you were concerned about personal safety?
Funnily enough, I cannot remember a moment that I was concerned about my personal safety, but there were certainly 2 or 3 days in a row of upheaval in Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, that can be considered as a security issue where we were on our guards. But otherwise, fortunately, during my time there, I felt safe, and no other people came to harm that I know of.
You also spent time in Bosnia.
That's true.
Could you talk a little bit about that experience?
That was very interesting. I had been assigned to Macedonia immediately before it. I was in Germany when I was asked whether I'd be willing to work for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe for a while in Bosnia. That was right after the Dayton Agreement, where Senator Holbrooke played a major role. And I gladly said yes and worked at the regional office of OSCE in Tuzla to organize the first round of Bosnia-wide elections after the war. When I arrived, people were still at the front lines, so they slowly came back, and I got the feeling that these people brought back from the front lines. I was working, as I said, in Tuzla, and Tuzla was considered a very liberal city where Croats, Bosnians, and Serbs lived together before the war. Fewer Serbs when I worked there, but still quite a number. And it was interesting to see how this war affected their lives and how they coped with the situation they were in.
What was it like to be there with a front row seat to one of the defining moments in the region's history?
Actually, the things I remember most is that it was very easy to bring some relief to people when you were just listening to them, telling you their perspective of the story. Because usually it's not so easy to help somebody, but I really felt I was helping them by listening to them. And of course, on the other hand, I was learning a lot by listening to them. Otherwise, the duties on that posting were really very much administrative, because we were organizing the elections under not so easy circumstances. But it always involved talking to people who had influence on other groups in order to engage them in the electoral process.
I'm sure we could talk endlessly about just that subject, but to bring the conversation back to Germany and Florida, talk to us a little bit about how the process works. If a German company, for example, is interested in considering opportunities in Florida, what are the types of things your office would do to help that company?
Well, I would assume that they probably get in contact with the German-American Chamber of Commerce and would get a lot of information on the sector they are considering and on US particulars in general. But they would turn to us for visa for people who will have to go to Germany for training or work on ships, on German ships, where one of the port of calls may be in Germany, and in general to ask the questions you're not asking a future business partner. So the low-key questions which seem trivial, but which can be very important in conducting business. I give you an example that will probably convey the message, even though it's not about Florida. In Jeddah, companies would ask me how their women officials or partners would best work, how they should, what they should consider. People would ask about religious holidays and how to act during specific periods of the year, which is very important and very sensible, because if you make your business partners feel relaxed and show them that you respect their way of dealing with business or with other parts of life, helps you establish good relations. Yeah.
And then what about an American company that was interested in Germany? Would they approach your office initially, or another office?
I think they'd probably turn to our American colleagues, who of course have their missions in Germany and their organizations here in the States who try to prepare them. But in that case, too often we have Americans coming to the consulate for visa, because if you want to work or if you serve there, you need visa or other papers, depending on the kind of work you do.
So tell us about the assistance that you provide to German tourists. Many of us don't think about those details. We see tourists from Germany, say hello, and we move on. But what if a German tourist has issues such as losing a passport or being, unfortunately subjected to a crime, a robbery or something like that? What assistance might that person expect from the consulate?
If he just loses the passport, it's a bit of administrative hassle, but we will provide him with a document that will allow him to return to Germany. That is easiest. Sometimes, of course, they also lose all money and any kind of credit card or way to pay, so we will make sure that they have the means, either in helping them to contact family or friends in Germany, so that they can receive money by Western Union, or if everything else fails, we can provide them funds to go back to Germany, if that's an issue. Of course, we help them to get medical or legal assistance if need be, and we do have some unfortunate Germans who were jailed in Florida, so we will visit them every once in a while, make sure that they get all the assistance they need, and yes, I think that is what comes up most.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of your objectives is to reach young people. Tell us about your work with universities and colleges in Florida.
This is what I like most. As I said at the beginning, we go to universities, we do presentations on Germany. We want to put Germany on the map on an imaginative map of American students. We want them to entice them to go to Germany for a vacation, to study, because in Germany the best universities are public universities, and tuition is essentially free. So for $700 fee, you get a semester of free tuition, and I think this is a great way to experience another country. Getting your degree, learning another language, because many of the courses are in English nowadays, not all, but a good godly number. And I would encourage students to do so. But the main point for me is to answer the questions, to correct preconceived notions if need be, and to make them want more information about Germany.
So, two questions based on that. What is the most common misconception about Germany that you run into? And then secondly, what is a typical question that you would receive from a student?
Right now, many are afraid that it is unsafe to travel to Germany because millions of refugees overwhelm Germany. And that's obviously easy to correct because in 2015, which was a very busy year, a little above 800,000 refugees came to Germany, not millions. And the crime rate actually is lower than in the US, and it didn't change with the refugees. So if you go to Germany, you probably will not even realize that there are any refugees, because there are people of all kinds. Perhaps the mix is a little less than in the US, but you just see people milling around, going about their business, and there's no need to be afraid to go to Germany, quite the contrary. And the question I get asked most, except for the refugee question right now, is usually about studying in Germany, because people have heard and can't really believe that tuition is free in Germany, even at a level that is really high. And they are also wondering about foreigners being able to study in Germany, and that is very fortunate because we have a quota for foreigners. Sometimes foreigners can get into a certain subject, like medicine, which is very sought after in Germany, because the quota is not yet filled. So while a German student, even with excellent marks, couldn't get to study the subject, the foreigner can, because the quota is still open. So I encourage students to find out whether there is a way for them to benefit of that situation.
What about opportunities for scholars and professors? I've had a number of scholars from Germany who have visited here, some who have come to my classrooms to just listen in and see how the teaching methods differ. Are there opportunities for scholars, professors, to spend time, short periods of time, at German institutions?
Lots of them. They really abound. I mean, cooperation in research and development is something that Germany values highly, and Germany and the US are excellent partners, because research and development is at such a high level in our two countries that cooperation is obvious. You can't help it. If you want to exchange your thoughts, there are very few people who can match it at that level. The German Academic Exchange Service, the Alexander von Humboldt Stiftung, they are only two organizations of many who support the exchange of German and foreign researchers and experts. And by the way, we have the only Max Planck Institute outside of Europe in Florida. In Jupiter, there's the Max Planck Florida Institute, and they're focusing on neuroscience. And they are really well positioned to initiate a small exchange of scientists even here in Florida, and of course to help them make connections to Germany and to set up exchange programs depending on the focus of their studies.
I'm sure you never have a typical day, but if you could describe from beginning to end what your day is like at the consulate in Miami, what would it be?
On a typical day, I'll come to the office, I'll check my incoming mails. That's very important because, of course, Germany has already worked for about 6 hours when I arrive at the office. They will have all kinds of instructions for me. Sometimes they want information from one day to the next, so I'll be busy practically the entire day to get them this information. I might prepare a presentation. I may have to discuss a legal problem with one of my colleagues, or I plan with another colleague a panel discussion on renewable energy sources, for example. That's something else we're focusing on. And in the evening, I might open an exposition on the contribution of German speakers to Zionism at a Jewish temple somewhere in the Miami-Dade, Broward area.
That sounds like a full day.
It's a full day, and it's interesting every minute of it.
You mentioned outreach to universities, students, and so forth. What about the broader educational undertakings of Florida? Let's say, for example, that several universities wanted to cooperate to convene a conference on European security or the European Union or some combination of European issues in which Germany had an interest. Is that the kind of thing that the consulate would be interested in supporting, participating in, and what kinds of opportunities might it bring to the table?
Well, in many cases we will have readily available, because of previous experience in other countries, a number of experts that might be valuable contributors to the conference, or at least would be able to suggest other speakers that could be of interest to the universities. And you just mentioned two subjects that are very high on our agenda. One is security. There are many issues combined with that. And of course, the European Union. We're very proud of the achievements of the European Union. And we like to talk about our experience. We also like to get the insights of experts who see the European Union from the outside and wonder sometimes on procedures and what is happening. That would be an excellent opportunity to learn from each other, even in the preparation of the event, whatever shape it would take.
Mm-hmm. What would be an activity that you've engaged in as Consul General that might surprise people?
That is a difficult question. There are so many things, but what I think is surprising is that I have the very fond memories from a seminar on how to treat off-fall and wastewater. And I hadn't imagined that it could be so interesting. Another very fond memory is that was a security meeting, and part of that security meeting they showed you how police operate when they transport nuclear waste through Germany to a site where it is to be stored. And among the participants were people who oppose nuclear energy and people who haven't formed an opinion, people who support nuclear energy, but we were focused on this example of how it went, because it actually included footage from a camera positioned in a police command center. And at the end of the 5-minute clip, everybody in the room, even those opposing nuclear energy, were just glued to the screen and hoping to see in green, Castor is moving. Castor are the containers for the nuclear waste. And the moment it flashed red, Castor stopped. Everybody would be like, oh, what's happening now? Is there a protester hanging from a tree or chained to the rails? Or what happens now? What is the police going to do? Are there tractors on the rail? I mean, everybody was taken by the dynamics of the operation. Of course, it was for police, so this was the idea of it. But who would imagine that all sides of the discussion were so fascinated with it?
On that note, we are out of time, but I'd like to thank you for joining us today, Annette Klein.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much, John.
And thank you. For Global Perspectives, I'm John Bercia, and we'll see you next time.